At this point, everybody obviously knows that the next console generation is coming very, very soon, but it's hard to get official word out of these companies. People like Nintendo, Sony, and Microsoft are just so secretive that actually having them sit down and explain to you what their new hardware is going to be is such an arduous task. But today, we actually got a giant confirmed info dump completely explaining stuff about the PlayStation 5 from Mark Cerny himself, the creator of the freaking PlayStation 4 and now lead architect of the PlayStation 5. What's up, gamers? DreamcastGuy here, and I gotta freaking talk about this. I actually took some really detailed notes because it seems as if he decided to really just go over to Wired.com, which is a very prestigious magazine, and kind of reveal a lot of the juicy details as to what this thing is going to be. Now, there's a couple things I want to say right up front because they're the things that personally get me the most hyped. So first and foremost, apparently, he has now absolutely put in stone the fact that A, this is not coming in 2019. You're not going to be seeing the PlayStation 5 until at least 2020. Second of all, he has officially confirmed that it will be backwards compatible. He said that he wants this to be a little bit of a console generation overlap. Basically, you will see PlayStation 4 games coming out as the PlayStation 5 is on shelves. And this is actually something we've seen before. I mean, look at something like Final Fantasy IX came out after the PlayStation 2 was actually out. So it kind of is one of those things where it's not exactly a new thing and actually manages to basically bridge the gap nicely. This thing is so freaking epic, and it sounds like they're basically trying to get the PlayStation 5 to be the all-in-one device. So let's talk about some of the stuff he really outlined in this, because honestly, there are so many really freaking juicy technical details that he just decided to unleash. First and foremost, I am very impressed to say that it sounds like they're trying to make this, well, the ultimate gaming experience. Repeatedly throughout this interview, Mark Cerny talks a lot about, well, the weird hurdles that gamers deal with in games, and one of them is the fact that, well, there are loading screens everywhere. It's something we've all kind of gotten used to, but they specifically use the example of something like fast traveling. So when you're trying to boot up something like Red Dead Redemption 2 on the PlayStation 4, now this game looks freaking spectacular, but it's hard to get over the fact that it obviously can sometimes take a couple minutes to get into the game. If you're really just itching for some cowboy action, you can't just exactly drop in and drop out. So it sounds like one of the main things they're trying to do is make everything much more seamless. The ability to just enter the game, become part of the universe, and what they call gaming presence. They want it to feel like you're actually participating instead of just watching it on a TV screen. Now, the other thing about this is the way they're apparently trying to tackle this problem is with a custom solid-state hard drive, something that'll make it where almost everything can be done in less than a second. Yes, I'm being very specific by using that terminology, because in this interview, at one point, he actually gets a PlayStation 5 dev kit, which is basically just a computer in the corner at this point, and he gets a Spider-Man PS4 disc, puts it in there, and fast travels around the city in 0.8 of a second. In less than a second, he is able to jump around the city, when normally this would take about 20 seconds. It is something that, in my opinion, is a very miraculous achievement, but is only a small stepping stone in some of the other things they're trying to do with this. Like, one of the things they're talking about here is trying to implement ray tracing to make it where every single little tiny piece of the universe feels much more lifelike. Basically, now I'll admit, I am not super technical savvy. This is just the kind of stuff that I've researched, but I don't have a giant grasp on. I just want to be honest about that. But from my understanding, ray tracing is basically much better lighting spectrums. Basically, like whenever there's sunlight coming through a game and it's reflecting off your eyeballs, each of the individual veins in your eyes will all properly give off light. It makes it where everything looks better, everything loads better, everything runs better in a way that feels much more lifelike. Everything is much more evenly loaded in, and it sounds like it's something that could create some really, really spectacular visual depth, because they're trying it very clearly to push VR. Now, I know that VR is still one of those things that is sort of a dirty word, and some people are on board and some people aren't, but Mark Cerny is pretty clear throughout this interview that that is something they want to at least have as an option in this next console generation. There are actually smaller details in this interview that get me personally super hyped besides just the VR, which I do want to talk about in a second, but something that Mark Cerny talked about that I kind of didn't realize until somebody pointed it out is the fact that audio quality, the fact that we have not actually had another giant leap in audio design in almost 10 years. Now, what I mean by that is, think about the fact that how big the leap was from PlayStation 2 audio to PlayStation 3 audio, or if we're just looking at something like the original Xbox to the Xbox 360, these were tremendous leaps in audio design, allowing you to have better background music, better soundtracks, and of course, much more crazy stuff like a gun firing in Call of Duty sounds exactly like a freaking gun. These are cool things that, in my opinion, are very important. And they've said that they actually felt bad about the fact that the PlayStation 3 and the PlayStation 4 have virtually identical audio quality. Basically, game developers have straight up said, hey, there's stuff we cannot do with your hardware. We want to make sure our games sound better and feel better and have nicer freaking depth to the audio, but we just can't do it with this current tech. Now, they're talking about trying to expand that, and let me just say real quick why that is important. So I typically, when I'm working on my reviews, will wear big headphones for it to make sure I can hear every single little squeak and squeak and everything I can in the video game to make sure I can see how good the audio is. And I've definitely noticed that a lot of times games are just playing a soundbite to simulate what the effect should actually sound like. So like if you're going through a forest and you're trying to creep along and somebody starts sneaking up behind you, instead of actually having a footprint when their foot's coming down, it plays a freaking like clip of audio of a foot. What if instead they managed to change that so the physics was built into the sound card? Imagine if they managed to make something where as that guy's boot is coming down, it's actually crunching leaves, so you're hearing the snap of twigs and stuff instead of just actually hearing what is basically a sound designer pressing a keyboard button. I like this because I do think that this kind of stuff, while small sounding, is actually a tremendous thing. I mean, I play a lot of horror games, and I think that a lot of times it is the smaller little juicy tidbits that create the experience. Something I've always said, a lot of my friends are cosplayers, and a saying I like to say in cosplay a lot is, the 95% of your costume is 5% of the detail. If you're making a crazy freaking Horizon Zero Dawn cosplay or a Borderlands cosplay, if you have all the cool guns and all the cool lines on your face, it makes it that much more of a realistic experience by going that tiny bit further. And it sounds like they're trying to do that in so many small ways with the PlayStation 5. The major thing that Mark Cerny is talking about, though, is that he wants to make sure that this is not considered just a console with better graphics. He wants this to truly seem like the next generation, something that is a big step beyond what has ever existed before. But real quick, let's talk about that hardware specifics, because he actually dished out some pretty freaking, in my opinion, very transparent details to this. He actually talked about hardware, so get ready, we're going to just dig into this real quick. So he actually explained that the CPU is based on the third generation of AMD's Ryzen line and contains 8 cores of the company's new 7nm Zen 2 microchip architecture. The GPU is a custom variant of Radeon's Navi, and it sounds like it's going to be supporting ray tracing pretty heavily, obviously, since they talked about it. And all of this sounds super good. All of this sounds like they're trying to make it so the game is, well, so that the hardware is able to support the most realistic games ever. I mean, I'm excited for that because it sounds like Sony realizes that they kind of screwed up. I love my PlayStation 4 tremendously. I've spent literally thousands of hours playing it over the course of the last couple of years. But you can definitely tell that they just kind of got the cheapest hardware they could, the cheapest pieces they could, cobbled it together to make a console that was very easy to develop games for. It was an experiment and it absolutely paid off. But now, a couple of years down the line, it's basically just a weak PC. I understand that now this time they're trying to to do a bigger leap to make sure they don't accidentally fall into that same pitfall a second time. But no matter what, this has been a crazy freaking interview. I'm actually going to link this down below because I think that everybody should give them a click. Wired doing such a great write-up is awesome, and personally, I'm very, very hyped for this. It seems like we're going to be seeing this stuff relatively soon, and I expect that we'll actually get a chance to see the hardware probably in the next 6 months. I actually have a conspiracy theory that I think that the reason they're talking about this all of a sudden is I've heard a lot of rumors about the fact that the Xbox 2 is going to be revealed in its full at E3 this year, and it sounds like Sony is trying to get ahead of that a little bit and basically say, hey, here's why you should be excited about us before you get excited about them. But what do you think? Have you had a chance to actually read this article? Are you somebody who's super excited for it? And are you just mad that Sony ponies like me are just getting excited for the PlayStation while everything is just really ramping up? Man, I'm so hyped right now. But okay, thanks so much for watching, gamers. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a like, share with your friends, and subscribe if you haven't already. But do me the biggest favor of all and keep dreaming. I think at a couple points in this video I might have become a little bit blurry. I'll be honest, I forgot to set the autofocus because I'm so excited to just talk about the PlayStation 5 finally. Thank you, Sony, for actually freaking revealing this stuff instead of just sitting up in your cave and being like, yes, let them speculate. Thanks so much for watching that video. If you want to see something else, you can always click this link to see what I put up last, or, you know, subscribe and see what's coming up next. Also, I promise that whatever I do, it'll try not to suck.